welcome to another edition of What the Fuck Happenings here in this current location, Inmendham, mostly. Tough subject in the sense that it's still on the how to communicate with people subject in a way, but it really goes deeper in the sense that it really wouldn't be a problem communicating with people if people weren't mentally insane. I mean, just too stupid, or however you want to attempt to analyze how broken their fundamental understanding of the mechanics of what it is to be a living thing. So, I mean, clearly they don't get the robot thing, they don't get the determinism thing. Most people have some kind of perception that the universe is trying to be on our side or something, or it's deliberately made us for this purpose to be what we are, this form of animal. Even the word animal, most people, it's, they just don't get what is the nature of it, which is predatory. Even the nice guys aren't very nice in reality. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about that, and it gets into this evolution subject and this little bit of physics. I know people just hate that. Because my physics isn't full of woo, the small universe doesn't get fancier and more interesting. It gets duller and less interesting. That we're made up of an elemental substance that is probably as simple as up, down, or on, off, or left, right, or hot, cold, and it's just the fact that you had something that was different, even if it was just in a different place, and it ended up mixing into the stuff that we are, just by a mechanical process. And people just, no way that can be true. It has to be some kind of, there's somebody stirring it, There's somebody mixing ingredients and putting it in an easy bake oven and cooking this bullshit. And they don't account for the fact that the obvious, I mean, this is, this whole atheism thing has been argued to death, but I mean, the fundamental question is the God doesn't answer any questions, in the sense that you've just invented something that it was forever, like it poofed, something more fancy than we are, just poofed into existence. And and the counter argument by the religious kooks is always to hold up a pocket watch or something and say, how could this come for nothing? Well, it didn't come from nothing. It came from a whole process of interactions, and over billions or maybe trillions or zillions of years, there's little systems built into the eddy. The swirling water is a little more complicated than just swirling water over time. And especially when it comes to evolution and human beings, right? Because without the stuff humans have done, there aren't too many pocket watches out in the universe. There's some complexity, but you can sort of see the swirly bits. You can see that it's just stuff, the Jupiter syndrome or the Saturn. Yes, it's a little bit complicated, but it's really easy to see that it's, it's not some gears and, it doesn't have any real complexity to it. It's all kind of a simple mechanism. Stick with a string and a ball at the end or something. Just isn't all that sophisticated. So, but that's the starting point. The reality is that it gets simpler. The function gets simpler. You go back and it gets simpler, not more complicated. Just as human civilization, you go back and it gets simpler, not more complicated. And people just are obnoxious to that. They just can't They so many of them anyway. It seems apparent they can't even understand why you would. They think you unreasonable, like it doesn't make sense to them somehow to perceive the universe as a machine, a mechanism. The mechanism just acquires a habit over time, a structure. And like a geyser or something, it can appear to have some sort of intentionality. Hey, look, it shoots water every hour. It must know how to tell time. It really doesn't. And, it's just a system. And we're just the byproduct of a system of evolution. And so much of us are it's just so obvious. I always tend to, end up going to the more sexual biology, but I mean, just even the invention, I've said it before, of the penis is just, when you think about it, it's just such a great example of how cold-hearted the game is, in the sense that you went from organisms that didn't, that had both sexes essentially, that just first they cloned, and then they fell upon, because there was an advantage to an organism that could screw up the copying process, right? So the idea was to make copies of yourself. But if you make exact copies, you're not going to win in the battle in the long run, because you won't change to the environment. You won't change to the competition. You won't evolve. And so the organisms that were going to succeed over time were going to be the ones that could screw up the copies just enough to sometime do some good, make a mistake that was a happy accident. And so they found that with some sort of sexual reproduction, that is, creating an egg and a sperm and creating a little game for them to play, that they could screw up, create variety. And variety was good in the terms of the evolutionary game. Not creating clones was a good idea. Perfect clones. And then went that step further, that the organisms themselves became male and female. And now there was a new game, to be played. It's not only we're going to, yes, there's sexual bits are also going to play the game, but there's another bigger game between the men and the women's, and the men and the men, and the women. More game to play, to glean the better copy out of the huge number of varieties of copies. And so there was this point where one's laying eggs. That's how the system worked. Sex wasn't much of a fun sport. The female just pooed some eggs, and the male just, pissed on them. It was just not the same thing exactly. And then evolution, the game, the sport, sort of demanded that, the ones who were going to win are the ones that got on those eggs first. And it became kind of obvious, well, the eggs, fall out of the chick, so maybe if I stick to her, I'll be first. So they had all kinds of sticking plans and getting close plans, and then it became, the crowd would form. And now the game became, no, you got to go even a little better than that. And so it became get to the eggs before they even come out. And so arises the penis in fish. I mean, it was before us, long before us. And it's just a kind of a crude weapon as it started off. Just something to take advantage of. This is a good weapon in the battle of who's going to get there first. And that's all it is. And most people have all this romantic notions and love and all this other kind of crap. And all of that's fine. I'm not saying don't live in your personal emotional delusions that make interacting and living more fun. But if you're going to make a philosophical statement, if you're going to make a statement about the truth, okay, and what's really going on, that shit, love doesn't have anything to do with it. I mean, that shit just isn't relevant to the how we've been programmed and what the game is. And so yeah, just, you know, people ought to just be honest about the kind of machines that we are, and we're just machines, and we're clearly, you know, we might think that the software is something we can control. Okay, maybe the hardware, I didn't have anything to do with my genetics and you know, a lot of stuff, but oh no, the software, I'm in complete control. But you know, as I've extensively mused on the subject, none of it, you know, just none of it. There's not a creative element inside of you, realistically, that isn't inevitable and programmed. You don't have any choices. The stuff that's happening in your subconscious just doesn't have a random moment. It doesn't have a spontaneous moment. It doesn't have any of that stuff. It's just a bunch of mechanical mixing of gears. You know, and it just depends on how your gears have been filed by your life experience, by listening to these kind of videos or doing some, you know, whatever the bullshit is you did that has gotten you to a place in time where you have certain information and certain perceptions of reality and certain word associations. I mean, I could say a word and you'll have a reaction word. You know, all of that stuff. There's no, you know, there's no you control. There's just a bunch of experiences that have filed you into a condition. And you are what you are. You're a machine. You're like a car. You know, Volkswagen might wish it was a BMW, but it can only wish because it's not. And we're stuck being creatures of our experience, of the the crappy environment that made us. The only good news is the environment doesn't make us on purpose. So again, it's you know, just as our biology doesn't clone, there's no mechanism in the experience bucket that has any real order to it. You know, our experiences have some there's some logic built into the evolution of civilization and culture, but we know that a lot of it is illogical and irrational, and people vote for things for stupid reasons, and the whole destiny of politics and everything else is all kind of mushy and doesn't have anything to do with merit in any true intellectual, rational sense. A lot of it doesn't. And but part of it is there's this tendency for the better arguments to win over time. But look, we're still arguing with 2,000-year-old fables and people who are clinging to them desperately. You know, silly little Santa Claus stories. I mean, they're no better than that. And they're clinging to them, and oh, they can't let go. I mean, it's just that pathetic. And some of that irrationality is in the mix of the encyclopedia stuff, you know, so we can be exposed to the encyclopedias or the National Geographics or the Time Life or the documentaries. But we're also exposed to the UFO channel. I guess they call it the Learning Channel, but right, it's the Ghost and UFO channel or whatever it is. There's so much garbage mixed in. So I'm just, you know, so I don't know if there's a big point to be made except for, you know, that there is, it's not like logic that there isn't some mechanism that attempts to apply merit. But it's just that the error code is so massive, so extensive, that mechanism that tends towards rewarding reasonableness or reasoning are being able to do better because you have more facts. I mean, it seems obvious that we all should be able to maximize our performance if we have more facts as weapons, more truth statements. But the world is so upside down and backwards. It essentially rewards criminality. It rewards lying and shystery and all kinds of stuff. So all of that kind of falls apart to some extent. That there won't be the connection that should exist between thinking rationally and success, and especially in a circumstance like reproductive success, because obviously the rational people are going to have sensible apprehension, especially about doing something that's just ludicrous, like having 10 kids. I mean, no rational person would, somewhere along, like after the third or the fourth, most rational people are going to say, I'm getting in way too deep, especially if I'm a garbage man or something. And it takes an irrational person to be able to make that kind of mess. But that kind of mess has, is powerful in the terms of that will decide the nature of your society, is the people who are reckless rather than the people who are careful. Dumb people have just as much power in the biological war as smart people, and they have even more in the sense that they're willing to do all the stupid things, to make all the stupid mistakes, that make it possible. Just as that first organism that started, essentially raping, the females, didn't really know he was raping, but it's there, and it's only the idiots would cross that line. So if there was a smart fish, he'd say, no, I'm too sophisticated, I understand she's a person. I don't have any right to get to her eggs that soon. I have to wait till they come out. I mean, it's just not fair, to invade her space, to take my advantage. So yeah, intelligent people aren't going to do the stupid things that make it, that create advantage. So it's just like cheating in any kind of contest. People with integrity won't cheat in a fight, and so they'll lose more fights, because obviously people say, well, cheat. It's just obvious they're going to lose more fights that way. Fighting fair has the risk that you might lose. Where if you cheat, you can guarantee a higher percentage of winning if you're willing. And that's what I was trying to get to, is those kind of mechanisms are still way too strong an influence on how humans interact. So there's no obligation for people to be rational, or even I don't know. It's like asking them to be rational is way too much. I'm trying to get them not to be psychotically stupid. Hugging a Santa Claus story. Hugging complete fantasies. And like I say, you see this with even the atheist types, with their wooey, bending of the physical realities and trying to make it into a universe that's got millions and zillions of universes, and there's all kinds of dimensions, and there's all kinds of stuff going on, and they're just wishing they can hope for some sort of Star Wars reality, which again wouldn't be a very good reality, because it's obviously a world run by the Empire and all kinds of nasty shit happening, and all the peasants are dirty, and it's not a good universe. So it's kind of a daunting task to figure out, where do you start with people? Because can you just plead with them? Well, let's try to be rational. No, rational is just a word. Just like, no, it's a kind of a concept. Like, it's like adding the facts up correctly. well, knowing what a fact is isn't, there's no proof. So just, there's no, you can't find any kind of common ground that they won't blow up with bullshit about how they're somehow entitled to pretend the facts support, made up notions, and that they don't have to have any. Doesn't have to be any continuity. So this is sort of reminds me of, I've been talking to Hoffler today again on the physics subject, but it just reminds me of that you're just the blankness that your brain senses when you have to explain to somebody the difference between pleasure and torture, and say and explain that there's a value difference. You're like, no, I should not have to say that to any feeling thing in the universe ever. I should never have to explain to anything that can feel that there's a fundamental, elemental difference between torture and fun. It's just, it's just the truth. But these people don't accept these fundamental truths, and you're just like, well, how can you even have a conversation? How can any words mean anything? If those concepts can't mean something, then nothing can mean anything. And so that just makes it a very daunting task to attempt to order the facts, put a bunch of facts together and, shave them into a nice, pile them up so they're a nice pointy arrow, pointing right at another fact. And, I guess that's sort of what I've attempted to do over the last 10 years, is to make these arguments about how just overtly sensible it is to understand what the real game is for your existence, and that the only thing that's really going to matter is that did you make more messes, or did you clean up more messes? And that's it. You either sucked or you were good, based on how much negative you either prevented or how much you caused. And that's all there's going to be in the end. That's all there is. There's just the sentient experience. There's just feeling things, having experiences. And if the feeling things would have been better off if you were never born, in the sense that they'll experience a lot less torture if you were never born, then that's the definition of your life. Your life sucked. It's just the way it is. It's the way the facts point. That there is no, I didn't mean to be an asshole. It doesn't matter. It doesn't change the smell. That doesn't change what the consequence was. Doesn't fix it. So you're still stuck having to take responsibility for it. To accept it. You can't really take any responsibility beyond, feeling bad for if you realized it before you're dead anyway. Obviously, it's not going to matter after you're dead. We all have some kind of notion that it matters. Like, I wouldn't want people pissing on my grave. But obviously, it's not going to really matter. It's they really can't get to you once you're dead. But just the idea of it as a concept, like I said, for most of us, I think, most people, maybe 50% anyway, probably have some sense of living a graceful and dignified and decent life. It's something they've thought about doing, right? I don't think most people are just don't care whether the world thinks they suck, or whether their sister or brother thinks they suck, or whether they think. So, and I think most people are kind of smart enough to do that looking in the mirror thing and saying, am I a good person? Am I good enough? Have I cheated a little too much? And be a little concerned about it. Want to be on the right side of that judgment. So you're, it just seems to me, when you think about all the people in the world and how so many of them have these silly foundational ideas, where they just make things go away, rock solid concepts just vanish, like they don't exist when they're so obvious to my living experience. I mean, again, no one had to ever inform me that feeling bad was bad and that feeling good was good. I just didn't need to have that. Nobody had to draw that arrow. No one had to put together some facts for me to explain it to me, because I experienced it. It was right inside of me, and the clear logic that my brain isn't doing anything different than all the other brains are doing means that the same scenario exists for them. And I never met somebody who said, no, that's not true. I really hate feeling good and I really love feeling bad. Nobody says that. I mean, even a masochist doesn't say that, because it's obviously their willingness to endure some unpleasantness is again tied to a relief and a feeling good. So it's just that's just the thing where sometimes it feels good to pick a scab or something. You're sort of making it a mess, but it felt better. So you did it. It doesn't really have anything to do with a theory of reality. It just has to do with the fact that they're using a little pain to fix a big pain. Distracting, their psychology that's screwed up. But they're not really saying, I can't tell the difference between feeling good and feeling bad. And even if they said something like that, it wouldn't matter, because it would just be a minor, tiny percentage of the sentient organisms that are that fucked up from the personal perspective. But again, I just don't even think they're that fucked up. I think they really do understand that there's just stuff they wouldn't want to do because it's just damn unpleasant. So let's not play games with... but again, that's the thing. They're playing a game with fundamental language words, the meanings of words. They're all broken all over the place by people. All this fluffy, meaningless mush love words and different kinds, things that just don't have any meaning. And, it's just breaking what would be the logical pointing vector. We would be able to get somewhere if they didn't break the words, break the vocabulary, break the fundamental concept of understanding where we are and what we are. I mean, again, to deny our crude biological origins is just so frickin' obnoxious to all the data and the facts. I mean, it's a conspiracy theory that just can't be just. It's worse than flat Earth. It's worse than, and you just can't. Nothing can be worse than this nonsense. To ignore something so obvious and so fundamentally important in terms of defining our circumstance as machines. I mean, I've also said this a few million times, but that's the only power we have, is understanding, is acknowledging, recognizing. That creates the humility, and it creates the obligation to think about it and not let your biology lead the way, and not to, it gives us all the incentives to realize, I'm programmed, I'm being manipulated by culture, I'm being manipulated by, millions of years of evolution. All of that is incredibly powerful information in terms of recognizing your biases and recognizing the frailty of your perspective in terms of how well you're understanding how the game really works, and that the game really isn't about just you and your sensibilities. It's a much, much bigger game, and there's a lot more players in it. And so that we can get to the whole argument about how for most people on Earth, the vast majority of feeling organisms are somehow irrelevant. They have no meaning. They're bricks. They're rocks. Their struggle, pain, and suffering means nothing. Unless, of course, they happen to have one as a pet. And then all of a sudden they can oh, no, he's a person. My dog's a person. But the pigs aren't, and the cows, and everything else isn't. So it's just those kind of duplicitous hypocrisies, so obviously irrational. In a world that wasn't so broken, that logic would mean something. Those kinds of hypocrisies would be glaring and unacceptable if we didn't live in idiocracy, if we didn't live in a culture that's gotten dumber rather than smarter, a culture that's demanding less reasonable answers, not more. So this sort of takes you to physics again, because you can go back 300 years ago to Newton and how much more intelligent those conversations were. I mean, if you read letters they exchanged and all that kind of stuff, the scientists, very thoughtful and intelligent conversations about, even Darwin, about how to understand and the rules of evidence, and now it's a cartoon philosophy. It's been just turned into this touchy-feely goop, and there's absolutely no discipline about recognizing big pictures, consequences, no pragmatism to the circumstance, and no humility about taking responsibility for wrong answers and their implications, how dangerous it is to get the wrong answer. Just a whole lack of seriousness. You can just see it's just so sloppy. The politics, current politics is just completely, it's irrational against irrational. I mean, nothing even close to a right answer to any problem. Just two extremists, unicorn hunters arguing with flying hippopotamus hunters or something. There's not a sensible ambition or objective defined, and so you see it with all these. So you got the creationist religious folks who want to bend the truth into something. You got the truthers who think there's a conspiracy everywhere because things haven't worked out quite right for them, so they're just looking to scapegoat everything. They can't, and then they start pretending that hundreds of millions of people have conspired to cover up truths that just no one could possibly care. Stuff that's just so can't even mean anything. It's not like they've covered up Soylent Green, where the potato chips are dead people, which frankly wouldn't even have bothered me any. If they taste good, I don't care. So what? I don't care what they're made out of. It's not like that crawling with bacteria or something, or they're going to give me a disease. But I mean, if it's perfectly edible and it tastes good, what do I care what it's made out of? But it's like, there's no cover up of something like that. They're saying they covered up things like the moon's really made out of paper, and somehow they're hiding that truth from us. Like, I don't know. Whoa! If we found out the moon's made out of paper, how would that change anything? Yeah, I don't think I'd change me any. I mean, as long as the moon stays up there and doesn't bother me, I don't know how it could possibly matter to me. We're just like, that's just too pitiful. So they can't even find anything of any merit to create their fantasies out of. The stories are just as silly as some kind of Santa Claus. I mean, or Easter rabbit. It's like, if you're going to invent something, why are you inventing something so stupid? It's just. Let's see, how many minutes? 34. Wow, it feels like 64. All right. Yeah, so I don't think I'm going to make the usual time limit. But I said I got to stop making these videos. I maybe got to come up with a different schedule. Making the videos in 2 o'clock in the morning probably isn't a great idea. Especially, I don't know if there is an especially to that. It probably really shouldn't matter. Yeah, it's just there's so many things I'm doing, and there's just so much you can keep your brain concentrated or focused on in terms of what you're trying to organize. How many I'm just trying to think of it's like there's too many things trying to get in, too few slots for them to get into. It's like too much mail for the sorter to sort. It's just backing up. So that's how my brain feels. There's too many things, and I cannot direct all of the information into the proper stream at this current time in my life. But I seem very functional in a lot of it. So, it's not like I'm not doing a good sorting job. It's just I got too much to sort. That kind of thing. But again, I'm always tending to make excuses for the fact that I got to do better. Yeah, I got to do better. I know I got to do better, and it's just how to do better. But knowing, how to do better is kind of knowing how the game works. So it's like if you want to be a good bowler, you kind of get a little bit of knowledge about how much the ball weighs, how much the ball spin matters, how much the pins move, how fast the pins move. So you get some physical data. You can improve in terms of your performance. And so kind of trying to understand the enemy here, which is idiocracy, recklessness, superficial people who have absolutely no knowledge base. They haven't gone. They've watched SpongeBob, and that's that is the extent of their higher education. And they have been surrounded by people who have just reinforced storytelling and making shit up and pretending to care about each other and pretending conversations about how we need what we need. We need the truth to be something, and no sense at all about the extent of your responsibility to be right. To sit there and say, I need to be full of shit because it's more fun. Our society needs to lie to itself to function, or some rationalization for just plain ignoring obvious facts. Again, the facts are just so right in our face. They're in our face. They're in every bit of us. You can see, with any willingness to see it, the facts. You can see, our evolution. You can see the process that made us, and you can understand why we're made this way. The fins of the fish. 5 fingers. It's just that kind of stuff. Just, it's all over the place. And, it's just a machine. It's just serving a purpose. You can watch the salmon do all this work to get up the stream, to have their guts explode and die. Now, like I said, if you told them what all this work was for, they'd sure be oh yeah, I'm not going to bother with that. I'll just stay in the ocean. Thank you very much. You know, they wouldn't play along. And if humans, you know, who are the smart salmon, you know, the salmon who've seen it, you know, because they've drawn it on a picture, they read some books, they can do some physical diagrams, they can sort of see how the picture is circular and the blood on the maze walls kind of thing. They can see the waste in it all. And, you know, they're trying to tell the other salmon, look at this picture. You don't want to do it. You really don't want to do it. And somehow they're looking at the picture and saying, you just made that up, and, you know, it's not really true that the Earth is, you know, hurling through space at, you know, 48,000 miles a second or whatever, blah, 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 whatever the, you know, whatever the physical, crude thing you're imposing on them. They'll just say, says you, or some sort of horseshit to make the truth go away. You know, just erase it. And, you know, but they're stepping right into the mud. They're stepping right into, they're like, it's almost like they're being just belligerently stupid, you know, in terms of, well, how much detail do I have to draw here about this swimming upstream thing, and there's bears up there, and you're going to get stuck in, like, there'll be some big rain, and you'll get stuck in a little pond on the side, and it'll dry out, and you'll suffocate, and, you know, and then if you get all the way up to you get there, like I said, you think it's going to be good, but no, you're just going to explode and die. You know, it's going to be really nasty. You know, and they're still doing it. There's just do it. It's like you're trying to explain. Well, look, if you tie a bunch of dynamite, you know, to your chest, and then, you know, start roasting marshmallows, you're going to blow up. It's a bad idea. You know, pour gasoline on yourself and then have a cigarette. You know, it's not that. It shouldn't be this hard to explain to people. Some of the obvious, like some of this stuff is just so obvious. The imposition argument, for example, is just so obvious that, okay, so what? You've enjoyed, you know, loving and losing. You've enjoyed watching some of your favorite loved ones die horribly. You've enjoyed getting screwed over by the man and the system, and then maybe you've had some cancer, and you've, oh yeah, I really enjoyed that. And so then you feel like imposing life on somebody. Well, you know, most of the imposers. Well, you know, it's just not true, right? I mean, my own sister, you know, had her kid after she had cancer. And it's like, you know, what the fuck? You know, somebody didn't tell you the message? But even my, you know, Christina Applegate did that. You know, I mean, after she, you know, has to have her, you know, this, you know, the whole mess, she has a kid, like, and a daughter. Yeah. That makes sense somehow. I mean, setting them up for it. And so you say to yourself, well, maybe you enjoy doing that. You like living that way, having your parts cut off and going through all this horse shit. But how can you possibly think you have a right to impose it on somebody else? I just don't know. You know, those kind of arguments are just so obvious to me. It's like, you know, yeah, I mean, you know, and then especially if you have any kind of sense, reasoning sense. Because if your life has been good, you know it's probably been good because you've been damn lucky. And why would you think it's a good idea to tempt fate? You know, to sit there and put somebody else that's connected to you at jeopardy. Because if you've been a big winner, you know, doesn't that sense of probabilities having to equal out eventually? Like if you're flipping coins and you've been getting a ton of heads, you know, you flipped them 30 times, you got 20 heads. And now you're going to give the penny to your kid, but the tails mean that you're going to, you know, bad shit's going to happen to you. And don't you have some sense that, oh yeah, maybe I used up all the good luck, and, you know, maybe we're due for some bad luck, you know. You've had a whole string of sunny days, and you kind of know that, oh yeah, I know that's not going to last forever. And the fact that people have no sense of, no, I don't want to be an imposer. And sort of as I said in the last video, I mean, the game is bad. It's just not a good enough game to force people to play it. I mean, if it was a, cupcakes are cupcakes with frosting game, if the worst that could happen to you is you got a cupcake, and the best is you got cupcakes with frosting and glitter and all kinds of stuff on it. That's the worst. Then you say, okay, it doesn't matter. I can impose that on somebody, even if they. I mean, you give somebody a free cupcake. Oh, what's the harm? They can just throw it out, give it to the dog. It doesn't matter. No harm, no foul. That's not what life is. Life isn't some no-risk proposition. It can be a disastrous consequence, a holocaust of horror, and not to have some sense that, maybe everybody who's going to have kids should have to overcome the burden of explaining why they think it's okay for them to play God with somebody else's welfare when they don't have any control. They have no power to fix it if it all goes bad. I mean, that arrogance. So that, that's another thing you're trying to explain to the fish. Why do you want to go upstream and make more fish to be sentenced to play a dumb game? I mean, can't you see how we've been gamed? I mean, swim around the ocean, get a little bit fat, wear yourself out swimming up a stream to prove your genetic code is better, right? You're physically fit. You can fight, and just to get killed, just to be killed for winning, being genetically superior, but you're going to sentence it on a whole nother pile of them. They're going to be subjected to the same idiotic nonsense, the same circle of life bullshit. It's. I mean, there are ironies to the conversation, right? Because I've used examples like, well, what if Tyrannosaurus got the faculty of reasoning first, language, and then could develop knowledge, reservoirs of knowledge, and put facts together and write them in good books and such. They'd have a real dilemma dealing with the fact that they're so obviously rapey. Okay, in the sense of that they're harming things all over the place. It's terrible, and they're built to just do a disgusting slaughter. But maybe that would give them an advantage, because it would be humbling. It would be right there in their face how this design isn't good enough. That you can't play a game this way. And there's no sense in trying to conform us into playing some other game, because it's not what we're built to do. And so I think maybe people would have a better sense of how nasty they are if it was more overtly obvious, how aggressive their ambitions are, and how most of their conniving and scheming and all of that stuff. Maybe they'd have a higher awareness of how insidious the design is and how bad the game is. If they were maybe, instead of prey, they were the predator. Maybe they'd feel bad about more bad. Maybe they would understand more easily. So maybe the better argument to make to the salmon is that you spend the 3 years out in the ocean, causing mayhem, taking a bunch of things that are just as equally good and valuable as yourself and chopping them into pieces. Usually young ones, children, murdering children. Go out in the ocean and murder children for 3 years and then torture yourself to swim up a stream just to explode and die. Why would I write that on a piece of paper and then stick it in somebody else's pocket? Say, go have fun. No, this is not going to be fun. It's going to be stupid. Yes, there'll be moments of pleasure. There'll be splendor in the grass. But like the movie Splendor in the Grass, there was just a few tiny moments of pleasure, and the rest of the movie is all sad and horrible. You know, and too much of life is sad and horrible. And the sad and horrible parts are just can be so bad, that you shouldn't be able to get over them. You shouldn't be able to forget, because they're so bad. So why should this be hard to explain to the fish? Don't do that. Don't sentence another fish, to be fodder for a game that shouldn't be played, because it's stupid. Yeah, okay. So, I made it to 51 minutes, so it's pretty close to average. Hopefully it's loud enough. I'm a little far away. Anyway, you'll live with it. Or not. Yeah, so I do intend to do some more stuff on this, in this area of philosophy. Just every week something happens, and distractions and whatnot, and so it just haven't got there yet. So, I think we'll call it a video. Yeah, why not? So, till the next time, thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time. Such. Yeah, that's good enough. Yeah. And the mouse isn't working. Everything's broken around here lately. I mean, that's just bizarre. Stuck inside. That's just stuck inside the box somehow. I gotta get rid of this dual mouse thing anyway. The mouse is never in the right place. I gotta figure out how this OBS Studio to get this damn mouse so it actually goes where the stuff is that I'm pointing to. It's always something. Technology. Are we playing it, or is it playing us? I don't think that's really a question. Alright, so till the next time.